Hello everyone, so this is going to be part 2 of my Kundalini primer series. You can see part 1 in the previous video. So I want to continue with the topic of Kundalini, the chakras, and what it all actually means. So I talked a little bit about the basics of the energetic level of Kundalini and especially the chakras. The energetic level of the Kundalini is a little bit different from what you get from the chakras. So we'll have to go into a bit more detail. But first, I wanted to talk about the physical characteristics of Kundalini. Do we actually know what it is? What does it actually do within the body? So I'm mostly going to talk about my own experiences here and how I actually perceive Kundalini in my own practice. So when I first started meditating seriously, and I noticed that Kundalini activated in me, I wasn't sure what was happening first, but there was a sensation of heat at the base of my spine, especially when I was sitting down cross-legged, although that's not the most common way I meditate. I actually don't think it's that important to sit in a classic yogic posture. Anything will do, whether it's sitting in a chair or on a bench or even lying down. So whatever works for you, it's actually fine in terms of meditation. But I noticed this sensation of heat, and it started rising up the spine slowly. It was a very pleasant feeling. And as it rose upwards, it became quite physical. And I started noticing the spinning of the chakras as well, which I talked about in the previous video. So it's quite important, I think, that when you meditate seriously and you do energy work and breath work, then after a while you will feel this sort of spinning sensation. So for me, the first chakra that actually became perceivable, I would say, it was the chakra in the belly, which is usually called the solar plexus. And this is actually a very important one. So it's not just in yoga and Hinduism, but also in other traditions that this is actually considered quite crucial, I would say. So to continue talking about the Manipura chakra, or the solar plexus that I mentioned, which is the one in the belly around the navel. This is considered one of the most important centers of energy within the body, and there are quite a few energy work traditions that concentrate on it. So not just yoga, but also various form of qigong or even falun gong, and Neidan, for instance, or any of the other traditions that teach you to work with energy, and it's associated with the sun. So obviously that's why we call it solar plexus. So in my case, this was the first center that actually activated, and there was a distinct spinning sensation, which is actually quite physical. So to the extent that when this first happened, I thought I might have an upset belly. It's a very strange feeling. And then as it progressed, I noticed that during meditation, the spinning became stronger. And at the same time, there was heat at the base of my spine. So the heat and the spinning increased at around the same rate. So then I started realizing that the two were actually connected together. So when Kundalini rises, of course, it starts at the base chakra, which is actually called Muladhara in Sanskrit. And it starts going up towards the second chakra, which is responsible for regulating the sex organs and sexual behavior in general. So that is when a lot of people who are activating Kundalini, whether knowingly or unknowingly, they might notice an increased sex drive and a sort of pressure, which is activating the second chakra. And this may last for a while, but most people, they move beyond this. And so as the energy moves to the third chakra, to the solar plexus, then this sort of sexual pressure, it will actually decrease. And so then you can move on from that. But it's also important to note that sexual hang-ups, they are not helpful in terms of the activation of Kundalini. Because in terms of energy, they usually occur just below the second chakra. So they might actually stop a person from progressing spiritually if they have very strong hang-ups about sexuality in general. And this can be a huge problem in people who are brought up in especially monotheistic cultures, where any sort of sexual expression is considered a sin. And so that's not always helpful. And you will notice that if you go to countries where traditions are a bit different and people have a different view of sexuality, that these hang-ups, they don't actually exist to the same extent as they do in most other cultures. So that's an important thing to note. And so as this energy moves up, there are actually various issues and hang-ups that are brought up by the activation of these centers. And why this happens? Well, you have to understand that the body is actually holographic. So a book I would recommend to read on this subject is the Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, which is a pretty detailed exploration regarding the scientific evidence that the entire universe is basically a giant hologram. And this is especially true for the human body, which is basically a projection of a holographic nature. And we don't fully understand how this works, but there's actually some pretty good evidence to this effect. So it's something that you should keep in mind. So regarding the holographic nature of the human body, it's important to understand that there is a blueprint of sorts which exists on a level that we can't normally see. But it is this holographic blueprint that is actually projected into our three-dimensional reality. And the physics behind it is very complicated, so I won't even pretend that I understand it, but there is apparently some advanced mathematics that would explain it to a certain extent. But from our perspective, it's important to note that whatever we see manifesting in the human body, in our two-dimensional reality, it actually happens in this holographic blueprint in the energy body, as we might say, before it happens in our physical reality. So whatever changes might occur in your energetic body, eventually they are going to manifest in the physical body as well. So this might be in terms of disease or different events that happen in your life. So that's why it's important to note that when Kundalini moves up from chakra to chakra, there are actually various things that are stored in these energy centers, not just in the main ones, but all over the body, from the feet to the shoulders to the hands, pretty much any part of the body that you can think of. It contains holographic imprints, I would say. So these are energetic engrams, is probably the best word for it. So any sort of memory, trauma, hang-up, attachment you may have, it's going to be stored somewhere in the body. And if you read this book, The Holographic Universe, you will actually understand and see pretty significant evidence in the scientific sense that the energetic body of every person is used as a storage device for our memories. So our memories, and this includes past life memories, by the way, aren't actually stored in the brain. And this may be surprising if you were brought up on materialistic science, but there is actually no evidence, surprisingly, that memory and thinking and consciousness takes place in the brain. It would seem actually that most of our mental processes, they happen all over the body. So the whole human body is responsible for memory and thought and recall, trauma, hang-ups. So anything to do with mental processes, basically. So I'm not going to list what each chakra does one by one, because it's not really that important. Once you experience the clearing power of Kundalini, the purging power of Kundalini, you're going to find out anyway. And there are so many chakras around the body that it doesn't really matter anyway. But you will notice that as the power moves from one energy center to the next, it's going to bring up different memories and traumas and whatnot, energetic and emotional blocks that you will have to deal with. And so that's really the challenge of any sort of Kundalini awakening, which is not to be taken lightly, because if you embark on this journey, either because you want to, or because it was meant to be, or sometimes it happens accidentally, you have to keep in mind that it will require a complete rewiring of your brain and your nervous system, and to basically change and reprogram your entire personality and your sense of self. So that is a pretty big challenge, I think, for anyone to face. So I want to talk a bit more about the physical aspects of Kundalini and the chakras, because that is the immediate manifestation of this holographic blueprint that exists energetically. And so you must understand that the power of Kundalini manifests in the nervous system. So it's the nervous pathways themselves that carry this energy. So when you start to experience Kundalini, you're going to notice nervous symptoms. So the nerves will start firing at a much higher rate. They will start carrying more electromagnetic energy than what you're used to. So that's what actually causes a lot of strange effects. Some of them which are known as kriyas. So as the nerves fire, there could be nervous twitches. People might start thrashing around. So that can happen. But there are all sorts of interesting sensations over the body, like maybe slight pricking sensation, or could be like ants crawling all over you. And these are usually temporary, so they happen because your nervous system needs to readjust, and it needs to learn how to deal with this increased amount of energy. So that's why it's important to keep this in mind. So one more thing about the physical aspect of Kundalini that I would like to talk about. It's a more personal take on it. So in my case, when Kundalini started rising, it was a very physical sensation. So what I actually perceived was like a black snake that was wriggling around in my body, and it slowly rose up, but in this sort of spiraling and turning motion. So that was quite interesting. And so it really did feel that there was something physical inside me that was moving around and trying to make space for itself, which is a very peculiar sensation, but it was actually quite pleasant. So it wasn't an unpleasant thing at all. And so this is the important part about the physical characteristics of Kundalini and what you might actually notice from the chakras as well. And it's important to differentiate between prana, or as it's called in China, qi, and Kundalini energy, which is a more potent form of it. So what we would actually call this energy, which Kundalini consists of, it's Shakti. So it's the energy of the divine feminine. It's the goddess energy. And as they say in yoga, there is what we would call God. So that would be Shiva in Sanskrit, because he is considered the Lord of Yoga. And so God, or Shiva, he extends his power. And there is this creative force that emanates from him. This is what we call Shakti. And the Jewish version is known as Shekinah, and Christians would know this as the Holy Spirit. So we're more or less talking about the same thing, but this is the creative power of God, or Shiva. And whereas the divine masculine, surprisingly, is actually somewhat passive. The active part of God is actually the feminine part. It's the one that creates the world, and it is the one that makes up the world, basically. So it is actually this outflowing of the divine feminine of Shakti that creates us and makes us what we are. So when we understand that, it becomes much easier to work with this energy, because it's not only within us and inside us, it's actually all over the known universe. It surrounds us. So we can actually learn to accept this reality and to work with it in that manner. So it's important to keep that in mind about Shakti. So I would like to wrap up part 2 of this Kundalini Primer series. I will continue from here, and I'm not entirely sure what the next part is going to contain. But in this case, I'm just going to allow Shakti to guide me and to tell me what the next teaching or episode in this topic should be. So that's going to be my guiding principle, and we'll see where this takes us. So thanks very much for watching, and see you in the next part.